Hello. So we are going on with the book of Ezra, and today we are dealing with chapter 4. And I'll just start by reading through it and get straight into the study. So Ezra 4 from verse 1, I'm reading from the ESV. Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building temples of the Lord, the God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' houses and said to them, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here." But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of fathers' houses in Israel said to them, "You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God, but we alone will build a house, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and made them afraid to build, and bribed counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam and Mithredath and Tabeel and the rest of their associates wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. The letter was written in Aramaic and translated. Rehum the commander and Shimshai the scribe wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king, as follows: Rehum the commander, Shimshai the scribe, and the rest of their associates, the judges, the governors, the officials, the Persians, the men of Erech, the Babylonians, the men of Susa, that is, the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Osnappa deported and settled in the cities of Samaria and in the rest of the province beyond the river. This is a copy of the letter that they sent. To Artaxerxes the king, your servants, the men of the province beyond the river, send greeting. And now be it known to the king that the Jews who came up from you to us have gone to Jerusalem. They are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are finishing the walls and repairing the foundations. Now be it known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and the walls finished, they will not pay tribute, custom or toll, and the royal revenue will be impaired. Now because we eat the salt of the palace, and it is not fitting for us to witness the king's dishonor, therefore we send and inform the king, in order that such may be made in the book of the records of your fathers. You will find in the book of the records and learn that this city is a rebellious city, hurtful to kings and provinces, and that sedition was stirred up in it from old. That was why this city was laid waste. We make known to the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls finished, you will then have no possession in the province beyond the river. The king sent an answer. To Rehum the commander and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their associates who live in Samaria and in the rest of the province beyond the river, greetings. And now the letter that you sent us has been plainly read before me, and I made a decree, and such has been made, and it has been found that this city from old has risen against kings, and that rebellion and sedition have been made in it. And mighty kings have been over Jerusalem, who ruled over the whole province beyond the river, to whom tribute, custom, and toll were paid. Therefore, make a decree that these men be made to cease, and that this city be not rebuilt until a decree is made by me, and take care not to slack in this matter. Why should damage grow to the heart of the king? Then, when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum and Shimshai the scribe and their associates, they went in haste to the Jews at Jerusalem, and by force and power made them cease. Then the work of the house of God that is in Jerusalem stopped, and it ceased until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Yes, so that is the text that we have today. And it's an interesting text because there are so many names, there are so many things happening. Okay, not many, but I feel like the more names you read, the more new people are introduced into our text, the more confusing it can get. And this is one of the problems that you can experience when you're trying to read a biblical narrative or a Bible book that is basically a story. So you need to find a way of connecting the dots. Who is this? Who is that? Who is that person? Who is this king? And why are they writing this letter? Why are they being mentioned? And yeah, stuff like that. So when it comes to making the observation, in terms of trying to answer who is in the text, I found that there were so many people, and so I shelved that to work in terms of processing. I will deal with that in the second bit, but I made a summary of the observation. So maybe you can also just pause the video and do the same. Just try and make a summary of what you see happening in the text, and then we'll talk about it. So in terms of what I saw as a summary, the basic observations of what is happening in Ezra 4 is that first, there are adversaries and enemies. Let's use simple English. There are enemies that are rising up to fight the exiles that have come to build the temple. Then these same enemies, they write a letter to Artaxerxes to frustrate the plans of the Jews. And then all this is happening, of course, in the province beyond the river. You'll find that phrase repeated several times in chapter 4, about 4 or 5 times in Ezra 4. And then we see the last bit is that the king replies to the letter, agrees with them, and then he tells them, do whatever you can to stop what is going on there. And then the building stops for a period of time until some the second year of the Darius king. Yeah, so and then now moving on to what my question for the text was. It was based on this question, on this phrase, the province beyond the river. So I really just wanted to understand where exactly is this province beyond the river, and how do I understand what role that plays in this, because it seems to be the setting. So you guys are over there, us guys over here, then there's a river. So where exactly is it, and how do I get to understand the location of it? And yeah, that was the main text, because it's the thing that stood out for me. And in terms of who God was in the text, I see that God is, I want to say that I wrote that God is always being opposed. Is it a character or a nature of him? I don't know, but I feel like there's always opposition with God. So when you're doing the work that God has sent, you can be sure there will be opposition. Just because that God has spoken something doesn't necessarily mean that you will not face opposition in trying to bring that to pass. And in that sense, then it's easy to think that you had wrong, or that God has neglected you, but that is not the character of God. It's a thing that I thought was worth taking note of, in terms of it not reflecting who the nature of God is. I mean, he has spoken. There are people who are against what God has spoken. There will be people who will come and oppose it, but it doesn't mean that God has not spoken. It's not in his nature to do that. So like I mentioned earlier, is that the text in Ezra is filled with many characters, which wasn't enough even to fill up the observation space. And so I took that text and decided to just process it a bit more, break it down, make sure I understand what is going on and who the characters are and what they're doing. So first of all, I decided so we see that there are adversaries, yeah, there are enemies, and there are very many of them. So I took that list and I just broke down the names of them, the people of the land. We see Rehum, the commander, Shimshai, the scribe, they're the leaders who write the letters, and then they have their associates who are the governors, the judges, the officials, the Persians, the men of Erech, the men of Susa, the Babylonians. Then we have that on one side. And then on the other side, we have the leaders of the exiles who have come back from captivity. And so we have Zerubbabel, who is the governor of Judah at that time. And then we have Joshua, who's the high priest. And then we have the heads of the fathers of houses, so are the elders of the community of the captives. And then on the other set, we have kings. Several kings are mentioned here. So when the adversaries come, they're talking about Esarhaddon, king of Assyria. So after, when some nations were captured, some of them were settled where the Israelites were coming back to rebuild. So in an earlier text we talked about the people of the land, and so those are the people who the captives came back and found, oh, we are living here because there's a certain king who made them settle there, right? And then we have Cyrus, who gave the decree to be of the rebuilding, and then we also have Darius, who is mentioned. And so those are the different kings who are mentioned. There's one more, Osnapa, who's mentioned, and as one of the leaders who resettled people in that particular area. The other thing that I did was to now break down the letters. 2 letters are talked about here, so I wrote down the list, basic understanding of what the letter to the king was, and then a basic understanding of what the response of the king was. So the letter to the king was just an accusation to Jerusalem as being it's, you know, the way, I don't know, you can have just someone who is out to get you, and so they'll figure out anything they can to say that will make you look bad. So this is what they were saying. Jerusalem is a rebellious and wicked city, and it's in the process of being repaired. If this city is repaired, you're going to lose taxes, and you don't want to lose taxes. And when they get strong, they will not be paying taxes, and then you will lose that land, which has a history of sedition, which means they basically rise up against the people who are in authority over them. And so they're saying, us, we are your friends, we don't want to see this happening, so let's we wanted to just let you know, look at your records, you'll see that what we are saying is true, blah blah blah. The letter ends, and then the king responds, like falls hook, line and sinker into their trickery, and he says, yeah, I've received your letter, it's been read, I looked at the records, you're absolutely right, the history of of Judah, these people, they are violent, they are against kings, and so do whatever you can to make sure you stop whatever they're doing, and what is being done, whatever they're doing, whatever you can to stop what they're doing. And so that's the end of chapter 4. We see that there's basically nothing happening until Darius comes, and the letter, Cyrus is the one who gave the order to be rebuilt, and Darius comes in as the second king just after Cyrus, right? So until the time that Darius comes in as king, there's nothing happening. I'm not sure what exactly that period of time is, but there's a significant period of time where construction stops and things lay waste. This is a common occurrence even for us Kenyans. I think we know that we have many construction projects that are just lying in waste because of one thing or another. The lawyers came, they missed this, the city council did this and that. So this is basically what was happening. So they've started something, but they can't finish because their process has been frustrated. And so that's how we end chapter 4, and we're going to be looking at chapter 5 going forward. We'll do a little bit of something before we get into completely off chapter 5, but it's going to be interesting anyway. So let's catch you then.